What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Calm Professional Podcast. I have a great show lined up for you today. I hope you enjoy what you're about to hear because I have a very special guest. Recently, I've had the opportunity to team up with a good friend of mine, Lloyd Sellenberger, with the Military Historian channel. And we were able to talk to a great friend who I've got coming up next. I don't want to spoil it for you. You got to stick around to see. And I hope that you enjoy what you hear today. If you do, remember, like, subscribe, and share, and I'll see you on the other side.
You're listening to Don Morrison, the Calm Professional Podcast. We see what you miss.
My next guest, Phillip M. Churn, Major General, Commander of the 200th MP, and basically a guy who, when you read his resume and you see the awards, including one that has presidential in front of it, you really want to probably listen to what he says about leadership. And I have one of his friends today with me, Don Morrison. Hello, guys. How are you?
Hey.
Hey, doing Lloyd. Great. Thanks, Lloyd. Great
Thank
to
you
be
for
here.
being so patient, General. I appreciate you you tolerating our setups.
Well, you know what? Murphy always gets a vote.
Yeah, Murphy's Law seems to always win out, too. I've noticed that.
No. Just like we're doing right now, we took care of Murphy. We took care of Murphy.
Okay, well, I want to go through your history for the audience so they kind of know exactly what we're looking at. Now, you were a general. You were a deputy commander in chief. You were also a commander of the 200th MP. You also have a long list of awards, which, by the way, if I had to go into those, it would take me all day to do that. But there are two very big awards that I really want you to talk to you about. One of them has presidential in front of the name of it. Could you go to the two awards that I'm talking about? And then I'm also going to let the people know before you go and tell us about them, about your educational level. Mount St. Mary's, bachelor's degree in economics, and the United States Army. You have a master's degree.
Strategic studies, I believe.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, strategic studies.
Yes.
Studies. Thank God that he's here because I wouldn't have remembered that. But tell us about those two big awards and how you got them and why you got them, and you, as a general.
Well, Lloyd, thank you very much. Really appreciate that. So, the two awards that you mentioned, and I'll mention the first award I received. That was back in 2019. I was the United States Army's recipient of the Ellis Island Medal of Honor.
Yes.
Quite an accomplishment, quite an achievement.
Yes.
And it's something that they do every year. The Ellis Island Medal of Honor Society, they recognize citizens who have come here, who can trace their lineage back from overseas, specifically their parents coming to the United States or them coming to the United States, and just achieving great things. In my case, my grandmother and great-grandmother immigrated to the United States through Ellis Island from St. Kitts. And it was a great for me to go back and to know that part of my history, my lineage. And it just so happens that, and here again, 37 years with the military, and the things that I was able to achieve and accomplish during that 37 years made me worthy to be honored with that special award honoring my achievements and my legacy and my ancestry from St. Kitts. And to go along with that, my grandfather immigrated from Antigua through Boston, which I really didn't realize that Boston was another port of immigration for a lot of people coming into the States as well. So I owe that to my cousin. She's done a great job in finding our history, and we can trace our history back to one of the prominent families in Nigeria. So that is really, really remarkable, and I'm really honored to have been honored with that prestigious award.
Talk to me about your Presidential Lifetime Achievement Award. What do you think, Don? You think we want to hear about that?
That's pretty big there, I'll tell you.
Well, again, you know what, and this we'll segue into this. This also goes to that piece about leadership. One of the things that I found about, first of all, the Presidential Lifetime Achievement Award, it's about giving back and it's about the volunteerism. And one of the things that I was able to do in the military with my military career, as I moved up into the ranks, I never forgot about mentoring my subordinates. And that was key. Uh, I did not become a general officer by myself. I had people pushing me, plowing the road for me, as you would say, or making way for me. And so I had to give back to others because, there were other people that needed that help or needed that advice, someone to sit down them, to give them an azimuth check to see if they were in check, doing the right things. And, I've been retired since 2019. And I still have some of my soldiers, some of my officers calling me, asking me for advice. And that's important because, again, as you try to navigate your careers and everything else, it's great when you can sit down and talk to someone who has gone before you, has traveled those paths and everything else, and can provide you some advice. So that's one of the things that I've done throughout my entire military career, especially as a senior officer, and more importantly, as a general officer. I specifically took time out of my schedule. I had my executive assistants built into my schedule on a weekly basis, mentoring for junior officers and senior enlisted officers, senior enlisted soldiers as well. Key, very vital. And I was able to accumulate that time, the hours and everything else for the Presidential Lifetime Achievement Award, which was, again, another prestigious honor that I'm just in awe of.
You know what, Lloyd?
And people like that guy sitting next to you too.
Well, and you know what? I was getting ready to mention that because he mentioned that he has people call him on a daily basis to ask, and I'm one of them. I burn his phone up all the time. He should have never gave me his number, is what he should have never done.
Well,
Because, and he gives good advice. So, look, there are times where, leaders need some help too, so, and he's one of those guys who selfishly gives back, or unselfishly gives back to everybody who comes across his path. So I appreciate that.
well, good leaders always do. And the funny part of it is I was impressed by your leadership in a way that you would not remember, but I remember. I was at, it seems that Don, you and I have all chewed some of the same ground together. I was over in Iraq, and you were over in Iraq as well. So you spent some time literally with us in one way or another, and whether it would be your command or whatever. I remember I was originally scheduled to be mobilized out of San Antonio, and General Green looked at me, and I told you a story before this. He said, "You're a little bit long in the tooth," and you were there at the time, and you were saying, "Look, maybe he is right here." And all I could say was, "Thank God you noticed." I really was a little long in the tooth. It was time for me to start thinking about retirement. But Don,
Right.
but you did serve as the commander-in-chief of the 200th MP while I was at the 79th. And it's a 222nd BOD. And I do have to ask you, and Don and I talked about this, realignment is a necessary part of what the 200th did once it was converted from the 220th to the 200th. Why was realignment such an important aspect of running an efficient command group?
No, that's a great point. So, and you have to look at the time that we were going through. We were looking at efficiencies throughout the Army, not just the Army Reserves, but the Army as well. You're looking at efficiencies, but you also have to remember, the mission. Okay. And so at the time, we had over, at that time, we probably had about 15,000 MPs in the Army Reserve, assigned along 4 brigades.
44 states,
And so
14,000.
exactly. So you think about that, and there was no overarching command and control of that size element. And this is a functional element. It's 200 is a functional command. And so what that did that gave all the MPs in the Army Reserve, if you will, that command emphasis in which training in one unit would be the same in another unit. Readiness in one unit is the same readiness in another unit. So that pinned one command overall responsibility for the training and readiness and validation of our Army Reserve soldiers, teams, and leaders before they went down range. And I can tell you where that paid off was at the 200th MP Command. Just in my 2 years as the commander, I trained, mobilized, employed over 6,000 soldiers in a 2-year period. So, and if you look at our op tempo, I mean, we really didn't have that dwell time that they wanted because the demand need from the Army Service Component commanders, the combatant commanders, the Joint Task Force commanders, it was huge. And so we had to answer that call, and by having the functional command there, and it was not just the MPs, but we had other functional commands, but by doing that, it made sure that we maintained the readiness for our nation.
Absolutely. Don, if you were talking about the 14,000 soldiers on the 44 units, there was an enormous amount of lower trace units that he was in charge of. And talk to me about the training, why it's so important to standardize the training, and what he just spoke about. Why is that such an issue when you're going downrange?
Well, of course, Lloyd, anything that you do when it comes to training, first of all, that's typically where if something's going to get cut, it's always going to be training. So that is one of the things where he focuses on, and he focused on while he was there, to make sure that we are all doing the exact same thing.
Okay.
Look, the 200th MP is big. So, and when you see MPs, that just means, or I don't think people realize the different functionalities that the different MP units have. Yeah. You have some that are like CID who have a specialty. Then you have some that are corrections. Then you have some that are like that specialize within K9. All the different things, customs, all of that stuff falls under MP. So the training has to be what they're going to be doing. And the other part about it is that I saw that was different in the training revolutions of the old past, but these were brought in, or the training that was brought in was things that had happened in reality. So this is what soldiers are going to face when they get there. This is not something that we're just making up out of the blue. We're not pulling scenarios out of the blue. We're pulling scenarios from this is what really happens.
Sure.
So that made the soldiers even more prepared once they got over there. And I think that helps a lot because, as I said before, if you're going over there and you've been training one way and it has nothing to do with, kind of how you're actually going to operate, yeah, it's training. But when you're training and it actually is what you're going to be running into, and you get on the ground day one and you see it, that's something totally different.
Would that fall under General Churn? Would that fall under TTPs that you actually update on a regular basis?
Absolutely right. And to even enhance that, we would actually bring back soldiers from theater to help us so that we understood and had the latest TTPs. So what we were teaching them and preparing them to go over and do, they would actually have that training beforehand, that knowledge beforehand. Absolutely.
There's one thing that General Churn mentioned earlier was the tempo. The tempo in the last couple of years has been tremendous.
Yes.
So when you're talking about reservists, you have to remember reservists are typically thought of as the I hate to say it, but the weekend warriors. You get mobilized, you go for maybe a year, and you come back to work. And he was talking about dwell time. So for the reservists, our dwell time, and correct me if I'm wrong, General Churn, but it was 5 years in country. Once you hit that 5-year mark, your name's back on the list to be deployed again.
I would have to add on that 5 years somehow always ended up being 2 or 3.
Well, that's exactly my point. We never made it to that 5-year dwell time. It was, hey, the unit just came back, but unfortunately you got to go back again. So you can imagine how that plays into when you look at from a corporate world side of the house, when you're having to hire people and have them be ready to work here.
Yeah.
But now they have to be gone to do, stuff for the country as well. So, but most employers they didn't give a lot of pushback because they understood what we were doing. But it was a matter of it was a constant tempo. And,
yes, it was.
And it was not just sometimes it was, you leave for 1 year in your mind, and then you ended up like, I think General Churn and I and several others, you're there for a couple of years. So,
it happens that way. You're exactly right. You can be extended, or you come back and you think you have this dwell time, and then before you know it, you're gone next year again.
that's right.
Yep. I think I was actually extended beyond my ETS date once. And it actually worked out for me because I was a WG employee. So it worked out well that I enlisted over. And if you remember, WG employees weren't allowed to get bonuses unless they enlisted overseas in a war zone. So I said, okay, now's the perfect time. Enlist while you can get a bonus. And I was a broadcast journalist, $10,000 bonus. I wasn't going to turn that down.
Yeah. There are some benefits. You're absolutely right. There are some.
Now, I noticed that you keep coming back to the same well because the 220th actually went away and 200th replaced them. You were actually the deputy commander-in-chief for the 200th, and then you went from there to the commander-in-chief. That's quite a jump there. And was it very natural? Tell us about commanding the 200th and what you saw while you were doing that and the things that you've brought into the civilian world, because I notice you're wearing a shirt. I'm looking at that. How do you pronounce that?
That is this. Well, the shirt, this is called syzygy.
Syzygy.
It's a astrological term. It's the alignment of three or more celestial bodies in a near straight line. So for me and my company, syzygy is the alignment of your safety, security, and your business goals to ensure your continued success. So after I retired, I started Syzygy International, which is a risk management and security consulting company. Again, we do providing you with security, armed, unarmed security guards, executive protection, vulnerability assessments, vulnerability analysis. So we take a holistic approach and review of your organizations, and we align your people, your systems to ensure your continued success.
So Phil, and then I keep going back between Phil and General, but it's just a habit, man. I'm sorry. But Phil, tell us, is that within the where do you do that? Is that within the U.S. or where is that?
So I've had a chance to do this within the U.S. and we've also looked at doing some things overseas. Don, as you know, one of the great things about being the commander of the 200th Military Police Command, and you talked about some of this. I mean, I had soldiers that did customs missions. I had soldiers that did corrections missions, escort missions. And then we had our CID agents that did executive protection, procurement fraud investigations, you name it, criminal investigations, training, assistance business. So one of the things that we had to do, fortunate enough, with my CID guys, we were able to put together a procurement fraud training program for some procurement fraud investigators overseas. Worked out very well. We aligned it, we developed the program for them and everything else. So, the 200th, they always ask you, what are you going to do when you grow up and everything else? And
I'll be a general.
I was very fortunate. What's that?
I'll be a general. Why not? Let's really shoot for the stars.
Well, you know what? But even generals, even once you're general, you still have to take the uniform off. We all have an expiration date where we have to take the uniform off and make room for someone else. But again, I've been very fortunate enough that I have doing something that I really enjoyed doing as the commander of the 200th, leading the military police command, and then realizing that the abilities, the capabilities of that, and then turning that into a job afterwards, after I retired. And so it's great. And then the ability to reach back to especially my CID warrant officers that worked with me. And I've been able to reach back to my retired CID warrant officers, and I've been able to employ them and give them jobs and doing things. So that's worked out very well.
Well, I'm looking over here, Don.
Yeah. Well, look, I'll tell you, Lloyd and I talked about this off camera beforehand, and I was kind of telling them that the one thing that we know that when your syzygy comes into the picture, the people that are going to be coming in to help, if they're the vendor that's going to help you, they have been trained. We know that for a fact because we know that they were training. They went through the executive protection training. They went through the fraud investigation. All of these guys were investigators.
Sure.
And remember, this is a reservist. Almost probably about, I would say, 85 to 90%, if not more, are current law enforcement officers who are still out there doing these skills on a daily basis. So the skills are sharp. So if you're getting these guys, you're getting some good stuff.
Yeah. And you, sir, was a police officer or CID as well, weren't you? But I know you did detainment ops in Afghanistan. That I did read in your. But have you done any kind of law enforcement as of yet?
I have not done law enforcement. That's the one thing that I do not have. So, no. So I was not a law enforcement officer. But again, military police. So I mean, I've commanded 2 battalion commanders, 2 battalion commands, law enforcement.
Yeah.
Again, I mobilized over 6,000 soldiers. I've personally been mobilized in doing the law enforcement operations overseas, everything from escort missions to detention missions to investigations. So I have done those things essentially myself, yes.
And, he's kind of, if you really think about it, to I don't want to say to dumb it down, but to dumb it down a little bit, just think of, he would be like a sheriff, because a sheriff doesn't necessarily have to be a law enforcement officer. He can be elected
by the people.
And he
elected by Congress in his case.
And he runs the sheriff's department. And, hey, General Churn did a heck of a job running the 200.
He was
I'm going to tell you that right now.
No, I enjoyed the 200s when I was under them, and I loved them. What I loved about it was the organization had defined set of rules in the way they did things, and the procedures were very well defined versus other command groups, which sometimes they seemed like they were constantly in flux trying to learn what they needed to do. 200th was complete opposite.
And General Churn, you can talk at this at the very high level, but while he was there, one of the things that was different that he brought in was the ability for the CID agents and the MPs to do things that we have never done before. Like, we partnered with special operations and did a lot of training for them and assisted on some of the missions and things like that. We've actually done some stuff that were like dealing with actual terrorists that hadn't been done before. And this was because, and I'm thinking that this was because people just didn't realize the amount of expertise that comes in with this MPs. And again, you're bringing reservists who are mostly cops on the outside. Why not use all of that knowledge that they have, and let's use it with the military?
That's true.
Now, I'm not knocking the MPs on the active duty. It's not a knock on them, but they have so much training. The outside and the civilians have so much training, and when you put those two elements together, they can teach each other things that one or the other didn't know, and you become stronger for it.
You don't miss much, do you?
No. So, and this was,
and that's one thing that is one of the things that's great about our total Army. We have not only the active component, we have the National Guard, and then we also have the Army Reserve. And again, we always talk about our civilian acquired skills that we can bring into the active component, the Army Reserve, the National Guard, and the active duty when we team up together, and vice versa. I mean, the training that our soldiers go through, our NCOs go through, is second to none. We have the best enlisted force of any Army ever. But that same training, that same leadership skills that they acquire if they're on active duty, if they acquire that through their National Guard or the Army Reserve, we are able to combine all of that to give us the best product in the world.
Absolutely. And one of the things I noticed about your resume was that you have had a chance to do a lot of cross-training in a lot of areas. And I can only imagine that gives you a bigger macro view of your command versus just little minor areas that commanders who don't have the experience only notice certain things. Your training tells me that there was very little you were going to miss.
Well, and again, Lloyd, I mean, I've had, I was very fortunate with my training. I've been able to do training at some of the highest levels, the Combined Joint Forces Land Component Training Officers course, where you're really looking at the big picture of how you pull land forces, land component forces together. not just the Army, but also using the joint environment with our brothers from the Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps. And again, I had the honor of leading 1,300 joint service force personnel from the Army, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard, and the Coast Guard in doing a security force mission. And I can tell you this, when you're doing that, you really have to understand how each of those services work when you're doing combined operations. Good example, when we talk about gunnery, gunnery is different from a Marine Corps to the Navy to the Coast Guard and from the Army.
Okay.
So you have to incorporate that, and I had to do that when I was one of my assignments. I had to do that because we had to provide protection for one of our joint operational areas.
Very nice.
And so getting down to the basics, you have to understand. It took a lot of learning on my part, but you have to understand how each service operates, and then you have to pull that all together for the big picture. And in some cases, that may include the Air Force with fast movers and everything else.
Would that kind of your economics degree, does that kind of help you when you start to look at the big picture?
Only when he wants to cut the budget.
Yeah, when you want to cut the budget. Okay, I didn't want to say that, but he knows who had to say that. It had to be him.
Well, that's really interesting. I went to Mount St. Mary's College and I had an economics degree. And then, you go into the military, and I first started off as a field artillery officer for my
second lieutenant, right?
8 years. And second lieutenant, I was commissioned second lieutenant in the field artillery. I did 8 years, and then I became a DOD comptroller. So it took 8 years for me to get back to being close to anything with economics.
Yeah, but you know what? That did help you, didn't it?
It did. I mean, it gave me a greater appreciation for understanding not just what we're doing, but how we fund our Army, how we get our equipment to our soldiers that are needed on the front line for training and for warfare. So it's very important. I mean, each of these disciplines, if it's comptroller, economics, our nurses, our doctors, our surgeons, our surveyors, our train operators, our bands.
They all work together.
We all play an integral part in this thing we call the total Army.
Yes.
You talked a little bit about your career as a whole, but there is a question that I have for you. And that question is, you started off in artillery, but you ended up as an MP, which are two totally different things. So how in the world did that shift happen, and how did that affect you?
Well, what I used to tell everybody that even a field artilleryman has a sidearm, and that sidearm's that pistol right there, and that's what our MPs carries, those pistols and everything else. But so this was around the 10-year point in my career, and I was I was working in my functional area, which was I was a DOD comptroller, and all the combat arms officers had to have a functional area. And this was right after just like we had in Vietnam, we had the Gulf War, and we started to have this drawdown. We were drawing down the forces. And so all the company grade officers, captains in particular, had to go in and talk with their senior commanders about staying in the Army or staying in the military or getting out and going to do something else. So I walked into my boss at the time, and I was DOD comptroller here in Alexandria, Virginia. And before I could say anything, he said, "Phil, get out." He said, "You're wasting your time with the military right now. I've been where the military is going, and you don't want to be a part of that." And I kind of said, well, sir, that's easy for you to say. You're getting ready to retire. I could sign my name on this bottom line saying I'm going to get out in, I think it was like 90 days after you sign this paperwork, you would get out.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Sir, I could do that, and I wouldn't have anything." He said, "Phil, that's not going to happen to you." He said, "You've got too much talent. You're very successful. You're not going to have a job finding a job." He said, "You're going to go out here, you're going to find a job, and you're going to finish up your time in the Army Reserve." Then he said that there is a junior officer recruiting firm seminar conference going on this coming weekend or next weekend or something like that down at Fort Bragg. Go down there. You need to go. And, I listened to him. And that's exactly what I did. I signed my name on the line that I was going to get out. And again, just like I said, we all have our mentors and everything else. So I went down to Fort Bragg for this junior officer military recruitment fair that they had down there. And that's where I met my boss from Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. And I was one of 4 captains out of 350 that they had interviewed that was selected to come to work at Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. So I had a 15-year career with Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company, and I had everything they were looking for. I was a battalion commander. I was a battalion logistics officer. I was a battalion maintenance officer. And again, then I was, at that time, I was a DoD comptroller. So they had more than what they wanted and looking for someone to come in and join their ranks. So I came in as a commercial truck tire center manager, and the 4 of us, we were given some of the worst centers in Goodyear on the commercial truck tire side. My center was ranked number 83 out of 87. So you couldn't see the bottom, but you knew it was close down there and everything. But 1 year later, I was number 19 out of 87. And that's because of my background and my experience. And I remember one of the first things that I did when I came into the new location there, I shut the place down for about 3 days. And I told my associates, I said, we're not going to work under these conditions. It was dirty, it was filthy, 55-gallon drums of trash cans were overflowing. So we cleaned that place up for 3 days. And I was right there with them, hand in hand, cleaning that place up. And that goes back to, as the leader, you set standards.
Yep.
And those were the standards. We set those standards. And then the other thing, again, we talk about the background and experience. Being a DoD comptroller, I had a good understanding of how to read the PRL, the profit and loss statement. I had a good understanding of looking at the margins and everything else. And the one thing that we were not doing was that we were not going after the high profit margins, which were in our service component, and not selling tires. We were located in the DC area, and we had to deal with the Council of Government. So the government, you're selling tires at the government rate, which you can't live off of that. But we can live off of service, and that's what I did. That's what we did. We ramped up the service, and we went from 83 to 19 in 1 year.
Wow, that's a big jump.
Wow. I do have a question for you, sir. And it's a question that from my audience members, people who are looking to develop their leadership skills, and I did ask Don this. I'm going to ask you this as well. How do you define leadership, and what qualities do you need to make yourself a good leader?
Oh, wow. And again, that's a big question. I had a mentor. It is a big question. And I had a mentor when I went to so after I got out of the Army, I went to go work for Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. And I was there for Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company, and I had not found an Army Reserve home yet. And so luckily for me, one of the engineers over at the engineering system, he was also an Army Reservist. And he was I believe he was either the chief of staff or the deputy commander for the 300th MP Command out of Inkster, Michigan. It became the 300th MP Brigade. So I came over, I sat down, and I talked to him. And he said, well, Phil, what do you want to do? I said, well, sir, I want a command. And I said, I know that may not happen right away, but I'm willing to come and work on your staff until I can take a command position. A week later, he called me and says, Phil, I have a battalion XL position for you in Fort Wayne, Indiana, which was about a 4-hour drive for me. I was living in Akron, Ohio at the time. And I said, sir, I'll take it. And I took that job, and it did well. 9 months later, I was a battalion commander in Columbus, Ohio.
Wow.
9 months later, I was the 300th MP Brigade, changed to Brigade, MP Brigade S3, and we were preparing for an overseas deployment. So you talk about leadership, you're talking about standards. One of the first things you know is you have to understand this. You have to understand yourself as a leader. What makes you tick? What are your standards and everything? So you have to understand that. Two, in this job of leadership, you don't do anything on your own. You don't do anything by yourself. You do things through your people. So you have to have a generally love and concern for people. And that's one of the things that one of my mentors, Tony Loglock, who taught me about it, that, and I'll never forget this. He said that one of the first responsibilities of a leader is to define reality. Soldiers know when you're not telling them the truth. Soldiers know if you're just trying to blow smoke. So you have to define reality, and you have to tell them the truth and what it is. The last responsibility of a leader is to say thank you, especially for our reservists. I mean, they have a full-time work job during the week. They come in for that 1 weekend a month, 2 weekends out of the summer. So we really have to say thank them. We thank them for what they're doing, because this is not easy. Think about this. You work 5 days a week, you go off and you do your Army Reserve weekend drill. That Monday, you're back at work. You don't get a break.
And you're exhausted.
And then now let's take in the fact that you're married, you have kids. And then when you take on the leadership roles, it's not just one day out of the weekend, it becomes multiple weekends. It becomes multiple days out of the week. And now you're competing with your employer's time, who's really paying you that check, who's really taking care of those bills for you, that mortgage and everything else. We're not doing this with our reserve pay. So that's where that's where our employers, they are patriots as well, because they're in this together. So the last thing that you do as a leader, in between defining reality and in between saying thank you, you're a servant. You're there to serve your soldiers. You're there to make sure they have everything that they need to get the training done in that little bit of time they have. You have to remove these roadblocks, these impediments, so they get the most out of their training. So, and the leader, he's the teacher. He teaches you to accomplish that mission that he would do it if he could do it, but he's not there to do it. And then also, that means that the leader is assuming risk.
Right.
He is assuming risk.
It's on him.
Because again, it's on him. But he is giving you that freedom,
or her,
as a junior officer, or her, or a junior NCO, to be able to train your soldiers as you need to prepare them for the contingency operations. So that was one of the very first things I learned in leadership. Well, it's not one of the first, but it was one of the very key things about knowing yourself, and then about what your role is and what your responsibility is as a leader.
Wow. Well, you know what? That leadership that you were going through and that you were mentoring took you on further after the 200th MP, because you went on over to be the advisor for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, which is a pretty considerably prestigious position for someone to be in. Can you talk a little bit about that and how your past success helped you to get to that position?
Well, and again, and Don, you said something key there, your past success. So when I look back on my military career, each job that I had previously prepared me for the next level of my job and my performance. They say that when you're promoted, is that you're promoted based upon your past performance, but that doesn't really mean how you're going to perform when you get to that new job. But that's what's important. We're looking at your past performance, and we're trying to determine if you have the tools, the intellect, and the talent, and the compassion when we're dealing with our soldiers and everything else to make it to the next level and to command and lead at the next level. So those are all of the important things. But my time with as the assistant to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, well, when you think about this, the chairman reports to the Secretary of Defense and the president. And to be one of his assistants for the reserve components, I mean, it doesn't get any higher than that. And then you are advising your boss, giving him the best military advice on the reserve components, mobilization, deployment, training, their readiness, and how that affects them. The policies and the procedures affect them, and not just them, but their family members as well. Because if you realize we have active component, the National Guard, and the Army Reserve. So we have three components with three sets of different rules when we're mobilizing and deploying these individuals and their families. So there has to be some consistency. And then just to sit in the command and staff, the staff calls with the chairman and the other joint staff leaders there, and then you are actually looking at the big picture on where we're moving troops, where we're fighting wars, and how we're going to fight wars, and how we're going to train and position people and everything else. So it's a great honor and a great opportunity and a great privilege that I had to do that.
Well, I can only say, sir, that we have actually very much enjoyed you being on. I do have to ask you, if you had a philosophy in life, usually one or two sentences that you apply, what would yours be?
Ooh, geez. So here's some of the things. First and foremost, you know what in terms of leadership,
nothing like us putting you on the spot, huh?
Yeah. So let's.
Sir, I can help you out here. Just give me an example. My father gave me a phrase years ago that I actually believe in wholeheartedly. A man who serves himself serves no one of consequence.
Well, I agree with you. So here's a couple. I'll give you a couple. One, a great leader has the integrity to stand alone, the courage to make tough decisions, and the confidence to listen to the thoughts of others. A leader's legacy is not is ensuring that well, how's this go? Ensuring that your soldiers know what right looks like, and what right looks like, and they do what's right when no one is looking.
Yep.
If you can train your soldiers to those standards and everything else, then you can rest assured that you have done your job. The other thing I'll tell you that is what's the other thing? You go through all this training and everything else, and you're put in front of soldiers to lead soldiers and everything else. Soldiers don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care.
I wonder where you got that from, Don. All right. I'm going to wrap this up, but I want you to add to me, tell me the name of your company, spell it out, and the website and the phone number, if you don't mind, so we can actually people can get a hold of you and your company.
Sure. And so the name of the company is called Syzygy, 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 Syzygy International, and the website is syzyg-intl.com. Syzygy, intl-intl.com.
Outstanding.
Outstanding. I'm going to wrap this up, and I'm going to thank Don Morrison and General Phillip Churn for being here today. Both of you has been an honor. Thank you very much. Don with the Com Professional, and you with Syzygy. And look it up, and you'll catch us on iHeart. We're now at iHeart. And you have been listening to the Military Historian and the Com Professional. God bless you. Peace out. We have enjoyed talking to both of you.
Thank you.
Lloyd, thank you very much.
Thank you, Don.
Hey, y'all, this is Don Morrison with the Com Professional. Thank you again for watching and tuning in with us today. If you like what you heard and saw, please hit the subscribe and like button. Let everybody else know about us. I want everybody to come and see what we have to talk about. If you want to reach me, you can reach me at thecomprofessional@gmail.com. That is all one word, thecomprofessional@gmail.com. Also, feel free to leave a comment if you like. If there's something that you want us to talk about that we haven't, let me know in the comments or in the email, and I'll see if we can get it on the show. The only criteria that I have is just be respectful of everybody else, y'all. We don't need any more hate out here in the world today, all right? So I can't wait to see you guys soon, and I'll see you on the next episode. Take care.